alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning, everybody. I'm excited to come to this class today to talk about the narrative of captivity. I know there are presenters, and I'll be careful not to kill their presentation, but I'm going to pose some questions which we might consider while rereading the narrative, because I know that most of you read the narrative and you have had an initial idea about the whole thing.
Yes.
But for exam, for analysis, you should read it again. Okay? Let me start by asking you, how did you find the whole narrative? Okay? Was it interesting, boring? Why? Okay? Yes, Sam?
I found it interesting at the beginning, and then I started to get bored because she's repeating the same ideas. That
What is the same idea?
That she's talking about the brutality of the Indians and about her suffering and about God of Providence. This is the whole ideas of the thing. There is no something.
You don't find movements, so she's telling her story in a very boring manner.
Stressing all the time on the brutality of the Indians, and this is, I think, this is unfair.
She highlights the
The
brutality,
same actions.
the barbarous nature of the indigenous people, and at the same time,
making herself a victim.
okay, making herself, okay.
I was so confused because
But I don't want to discuss it, but I don't know, she was in a real ordeal, wasn't she?
Yes.
Okay.
I was very confused because sometimes I was reading it as a Palestinian and sometimes as an Indian and another time as an American. So I had so many ideas, so many perspectives.
So you were confused by how you should read this text.
Yeah.
Yes.
Should you read it American or Native American or Palestinian or a woman,
Yes, that's it.
because she's a woman who left unprotected, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, teacher.
Yes.
As the name suggests, it is narrative. And so it is narration of her story. She is telling her story, but I found it generally ironic, depending on our situation. They are the colonizer and they feel themselves the prey or the victim for the others.
So it's paradoxical,
Yes, teacher.
Yes.
Actually, when I reviewed her narrative, I wrote two things. The first one is this is a narrative of Puritanism, not of captivity. And the second thing
It's
is...
a narrative of Puritan,
Yes, of religion mainly. And the second thing is...
It's like a sermon, yeah? This is what you want to say,
Yes.
yeah?
And the second thing is her work is really lacks the depth of a literary work, because she focuses on certain ideas and she uses media risk as a technique. She started from the middle and she didn't talk about the beginning, how she came to this land.
Yeah,
And
as Edward Said said, she, what is it? She left a lot of things. So what
Yes.
is important in this text is not as much as important what is included, but rather what
is
was excluded,
Yes.
because she didn't at any time mention why
Yes.
those Indian people attacked her.
Yes, and the second thing is going through Afra Bin's Orinoco previously makes me doing a lot of comparisons, because Afra Bin was narrating a different story. Orinoco was an Indian who is taken in captivity and by the British themselves. So the story is totally different, the events and even the trustworthy, how you trust the writer is totally different.
So you think Orinoco is much more...
Interesting and I think readable a lot, and I wrote that she exaggerates a lot in this work.
Okay, yes. Okay, we'll come to you, Hanan. Let us see. Aya?
When I started reading, I didn't even think if we can even trust her words. Yes, she was a captive. Yes, she had a lot of things to suffer. She lost a child. But is everything everything she said was right? Or maybe she was just exaggeration, as Isra said. I think that she exaggerated a little. She wanted to both those Indians.
Yeah, you sympathize with her,
Not
as a mother, she has
mother,
children,
yes, children, yeah, because she lost a child. She suffered, but yet she didn't present the whole picture. And as a writer, you can be subjective, but you have to be objective as well.
So she suppressed some of the fact, suppressed
she neglected some of them to give the reader a good image of the Puritans, of the Americans.
So do you want to say like it was a kind of propaganda, like for the Puritan ideology and like
all narrative captivities are propaganda for Puritan.
Okay, good. Yes.
I have a response and I want to read it.
Do you want to read your response? Okay,
Yes.
you can come here, read your response.
If someone snatched me where I had brought up in. Since I am getting married the coming 2 weeks and my groom is a person that I don't know where he is from. Even if I were a monster there, I have to be the victim. Especially when it's being narrated by a woman. She will, of course, victimize the enemy. And she is the little bird. Her wings are not grown enough to fly. So how comes when the enemy is another little shy bird? Though I was the first defender about women writings, I don't know why I started to hate reading for women writers. Our minds move in a zigzag way because emotions always interfere. So getting back to my silly future husband and my monster-in-law, until this moment, I have planned for the first 13 days after marriage. For instance, after a week, let me say, she will ask me to come and help her in doing something. And of course, how kind both of us were in the engagement, how devilish I will be after grabbing the person that she has raised for 26 years. Don't feel panic. It's the same all over the world. So when she needs me to give her a hand for the first time, I will make a sweet apology. And of course, it is a fake apology. But come on, did I run away from my mom's orders to be present under the jail of my monster-in-law? This request means the yellow light. To not make longer, each of us creating a well-organized plan. It is the conflict of being in this house. This becomes a daily exercise after 2 or 3 months of getting married. 3 months and a day should be 3 months and a day means the emergency status and red lights should be launched among the rest of the family members. Those poor maids in the house, the husband and my husband, will be listening all night for the same scenario, but with a little modification each day. Each woman sees that she's wiser and she walks in the right way. It is not allowed for a person to wrong them. Even the poor husbands, the father and the son, knows well that each of them are wrong, but none of them could stand in front of a great scenario that's being narrated by a woman's tongue. For God's sake, after this, would you expect me to believe a woman that narrates the story of her captivity?
No.
Thank you, Hadil. It's too pathetic, like a woman, distrust a fellow woman. This is a bad sign in a way, but okay. Again, it seems like we have to read, like, I don't know, when I chose like women writers, because the majority of you are female, so I thought I don't want to be racist to choose text written by men. But anyway, okay, early, American captivity narratives, like it's going to be our topic today and perhaps next week. But as you see, I'm posing a question here before going to the presentation. And like this question has to do with what you have been responding to. Is it history or fiction? Because I know it happened, like the whole story of Mary Rowlandson's captivity was in the background of a historical event. But like the question is it history or fiction? Okay.
I would say that it's like history with exaggeration. It's not fiction. It doesn't move me. I mean, it was like the news on the TVs. Someone killed.
Okay, so you don't think it is fiction?
No.
Okay.
I think it is a mixture between both. We have historical events and we have some deposit of fiction. We have irony, we have symbolism or something.
Okay, so you have some contradiction. Like you think it is not fiction, like and you think it has fictional aspects. Okay. Okay.
It includes all the elements of fiction to have a climax.
Okay, and like we need here like to make a list of the fictional elements, you know.
Regarding history, it is actually a documental, a historical document for the relationship between the Puritans and the Indians.
So yeah, if we are talking about like, okay, there is a story, and the story is a real story, but like there is an angle, there is a point of view, there is a climax, there is an end, you know, there is a development. I don't think, you know, Mary Rowlandson is the same, you know, at the beginning of the narrative, like she is at the end of the narrative. Like we see a change. She is not flat. So we have some. It seems like history. It seems like she's telling a real story, but still we have the narrative aspect. We have the fictional. We have a lot of fictional elements, and I'm sure like you are aware of the fictional elements, like you know if you have a story, you have like introduction, you have complication, you have conflict, you have you know the climax, you have the anticlimax, you have the resolution, the denouement, and etc. So we have. We ask you to what extent is fictional, this is, you know, a question you might or you know think of for the, you know, your exam. I mean, so okay, it's part history, part fiction. We have to show that. Yes, please.
We always say that fiction has a sense of reality. It depends on reality, but I'd rather prefer the word literature, not fiction.
Yeah, but you know, okay. When we say fiction and literature, because literature is fiction, you know, and you know it has, you know, but there is conflation between reality and fiction, so it's good. Like, you know, it is literature. Can we consider it as a literary? It's in fact the narrative of Captivity is an emergent genre in the colonial period. Like there are a lot of women who were writing their stories, their diaries, and you know, women were the most vulnerable in that colonial society because they were all the time they were at home. The men were the captains, you know, as you see, and Bradstreet put the captains, and like the Commonwealth builders were men, and women all the time were left. And of course, like the colonization of America or the, you know, the established of America was not, as it was said, like they were coming to the Virgin Land. As we said, there were a lot of people living in this land, a lot of Native American, and like there were clashes between the colonial, I mean the Puritans who came to colonize the land, and the owners of the land. Okay, of course the conflict was over, like, because those people wanted to dispossess, wanted to prosper, wanted to build their colonies. So they annexed the land, they took the land. Of course, those you know, indigenous people had to fight back, and that was the whole story. During the fight, okay, they took captives, and it's very interesting, like how people talk about themselves and their captors. You know, we know, like in our history as Palestinian, like, okay, we have many captives in the Palestinian, I mean, in the Israeli jails, and they have a lot of stories to tell when they go back. Of course, the Israelis think that these people are terrorists in the same way. Okay, we got some captives, you know, Shalit, like, was in Gaza, you know. Okay, he was captive for 5 years, and I'm sure he told his story in a different way. Okay, so today, as you see, we're going. I know that some people are going to present, the students, so I don't want like to take all the presentation, but I want little to talk about the, you know, the war, or I mean Philip War, like King Philip. In fact, it was a nickname given for you know, the Indian chief Metacom, you know, this man, like, in the course of the conflict and dispute between the indigenous, his assistant was killed, and there was a war. Like, you know, his assistant was suspected, like he was giving information So he was killed by those people, and there was a war, like a retaliation war between the indigenous people, and it was the war, as you see, 1675, 1676. It lasted for a year. It was very bloody war. And of course, this captivity happened. Like the one who was taken captive, like she's Mary Rowlandson. She was a Puritan. She was a dedicated Puritan. You might see from her narrative how she was like very dedicated, very sincere, and all the time she was preaching. It was like a sermon. So if you want to understand, it's very important to understand the sermons or the early sermons of the Puritans, and to have in mind the model Christianity. I mean, the Winthrop sermon on the model Christian charity, if you remember the famous sermon. Of course, this lady was kidnapped. She was in Lancaster. She was taken by the Indians or the indigenous people, and she stayed for 11 weeks, I think. Okay.
5 days.
Yes. 5 days. She was very... Okay. Of course, she was ransomed. I don't know why. Why did they take her? Like, they were asking for ransom. Ransom, was important because ransom means money, and money means power. Okay. Of course, this story is a terrifying story. If we read the story, it's very sad to see a woman taken captive by, like people who are having like weapons and guns and burning the houses. It's very terrifying. Okay, and it's not easy to see a woman in such ordeal. Even though, as you said at the beginning, she was exaggerated, but come on, like she was a woman. Her child died, in front of her. So it was not easy. Of course, like women were writing narratives for many purposes. One of them to show the providence, the providential theme, how God helped them in their ordeal, because as it was mentioned in the model of Christian charity, like those people, the mission of those people was to build a city on the hill, and their suffering, like they should suffer, and this suffering is part of what is called Jeremiah. It's a purification for the self, because at some point you are a sinner and you need to cleanse yourself by being inflicted. So it's very surprising how this narrative ended by her embracing affliction I need, affliction I want. Okay. These are like the places she removed. I got them from the internet. Characteristics of I would leave the characteristics of this for you to to talk about. Are you talking about the characteristics, or should I talk about them? Okay, I'll leave this for you. But you see, as I said at the beginning, you have a woman who's vulnerable, who's being attacked. She's unable. Women all the time, like women were attacked, women were taken captives, elderly women, pregnant women, because they were weak, they were undefended. Okay? And, the whole narrative is about their suffering, their pain, until they are ransomed. Okay. Of course, these are the purposes, sensationalization, like you want to provoke people, make them sympathize with you. You want to promote yourself. You want to show people how, you are good. You are coming to convert the people. Okay, so it was part of this. It was like a propaganda for colonization. As we said, it was a kind of promotion, like what happened in, the early, histories and the early, Bradford's like Plymouth Plantation, and even John Smith, when he was writing, his diaries about the early, settling. Okay, now these questions are very important to consider. And in fact, they are questions, I took them from Heath Anthology Instructor's Guide. They're guiding us how to read, this, and I'm sure you have to take them. How does the narrative demonstrate the Puritan theology and thinking at work? See what I mean? Because some of you were bored with her alluding to Christ, alluding to God, And of course, here we have something typology. What is typology? You have to interpret whatever happens to any person by, by referring to the stories of the Bible. So it's there. In what ways does Rowlandson use her experience to reaffirm Puritan's beliefs? The Puritan believes that you have to persevere, you might go in ordeal, you are a sinner, okay, and God is inflicting you to test whether you can put up with this infliction or not, and the whole experience is to purify you. But you are being purified by being inflicted, and you are being purified by preserving and doing your best to help those indigenous people, to convert them and to make them, as she said, praying Indians. Because she talked about many Indians being good and being bad. The praying Indians, those who converted to Christianity, are good Indians, and those who were not, they were barbarous, ruthless, of bestial and a lot of animalistic images attached to those people. They were like beasts, they were ravenous. So the way she was describing it was very frightening, and I think it was very individual, very biased. Okay. The other question, how does she view herself and her fellow Christians? Yeah, and when we're talking about fictionality or fictional elements, the way you view yourself, the way you describe yourself, and the way you describe others is part of the fiction, because this is individual. So I think whatever we write, even history sometimes, it's written from individual point of view. So again, we should cast doubt on history, because history is told by human beings. It's difficult to find, pure history or some objective history. So again, we should take this, we should look at this as, part of history, yet it is literary, it is fictional. Okay. What do her dehumanizing description of the Indians accomplish? When she, I think some of you were not happy with her demonizing, dehumanizing, and perhaps you understand this is we as a Palestinian, we understand this better. We don't have difficulty in reading, by the way, Narrative of Captivity, because we go through this experience of being demonized by the colonizer, of being dehumanized by the colonizer, the way they are describing us. So it's not that strange or unfamiliar thing for us. Okay, are there any instances where she seems to waver in her faith? Again, at some point in her narrative, we felt her, she was forlorn, she didn't, even when she read the Bible, she didn't feel that she had that solace, that strength. And that was surprising, okay? But, here we have to interpret this. Does she have double consciousness? Why did she behave like that? I know she's Puritan and she's faithful Puritan, but is she like Anne Bradstreet? Does she have double consciousness? She's faithful at the same time. I don't know. It's a possibility which we might, consider later. Okay, more questions? Why does Rowlandson distrust the praying Indians? Why did she distrust them? Even though they were Christianized, but she distrusted. She divided, like they are Indians, barbarous, but still she distrusted them. They are praying, they embraced Christianity. Okay, how does she use the Bible and very descriptive allusions in her analysis of her captivity and restorations? Okay, whenever she was not happy, whenever she was, in a very dire, situation, she would feel that she was strong, and all the time she was comparing and contrasting her to prophets and biblical, people, biblical, prophets and etc. So, she used a lot, the Bible, and to some extent, some critics would say that, the protagonist of the whole narrative is God, Christ, Jesus Christ. This is the protagonist, and not her husband. And of course, some critics would say, yes, all the time she was thinking of her husband, but here the protagonist is the one who's going to redeem her, the one who's going, it is God. Does her worldview change at all during the 11 weeks of captivity? Why? And why? If yes, why? If not, why? Does she change, or is she the same? How does the narrative combine, demonstrate, refute what William Bradford of Plymouth Plantation and John Winthrop in Model of Christian had to say about the Puritans' mission in the New World? Does this narrative refute that? Does it support that? I think both. Because how both?
Sometimes she was with the Puritans, and I think that she accepted the idea of William Bradford, and sometimes she attacked them.
Mm-hmm.
I think that she has.
Yeah. So if you remember, those people came with that millenarian dream, that dream of building a holy city upon the hill. But what's happening here is manslaughter. You have genocide. You have people who are killed. You have it's you have wars. What a kind of utopian world you are talking. What a kind, I don't know. It's part, and again, it supports or it substantiates the Calvinistic creed, because you have a dedicated woman who was inflicted, who lived the ordeal, but she, because she was faithful Christian, she had to cope with that, and God was always in her. The whole theme for some people is called providential, because providential is providence, her providence, God, predetermined for her this ordeal, because he wanted to test her faith and to show how she was a model of Christian woman, who was very patient, like Job in the Bible. Job? Ayub.
Yes.
I think sometimes she compared herself to Samson Agonist. Have you an idea who Samson Agonist? Samson Agonist is a biblical Hebrew Jewish, man who came to Gaza, according to the myth, and fell in love with Delilah, a Gazan, he was the man with long hair, and it's this is this biblical story, and even John Milton wrote, a play called Samson Agonist. I'm not sure whether you have read this or not. A play, and the scene of the play was Gaza. So where in Gaza you should consult the people in the Ministry of Tourism. Where is Samson Agonist, a tomb or whatever? Some people say it is near Shijai, it's there.
It's almost there.
Okay, so we're famous, the Gaza is famous, Even we are besieged. We have like long history. We have Apollo statue appearing, like, you know. So look at us, you know. And I don't know why they are besieging us. Okay, because they love us. They don't want us. They don't want us to be corrupted, you know. They think if we go outside the world, we are going to be corrupted. Okay. Yes. Yeah, that's it. How does the narrative combine, demonstrate? Okay, we asked this question. I think, you know, all these questions, what was this? Virus. You know? Okay. So this is what I wanted to say, you know. But before I close, I would like to read, you know, the beginning of the narrative. You know, just to read like few lines and to see how this woman started something and she
We
ended.
are talking about this in our presentation, that she is starting from the middle. This is what we call it.
No, not the middle. I want,
Okay, this is it.
you know, like just to show you, like it's in page.
52.
Yes, it's like 53, you know, in fact. I had often before, it's the bottom. This said that if the Indians should come, I should choose rather to be killed by them than taken alive. But when it came to the trial, my mind changed. The glittering weapons, like all the time, she was thinking like if the Indian would come and look at, you know, she was afraid all the time. She felt it was like a threatening, it was intimidating thing. But when it happened, you know, she took it seriously. She didn't, you know, change. But we know it through the narrative, like she had a lot of frightening experiences, a lot of, you know, problems. But it's amazing how she ended by saying, but now I see the Lord had his time to scourge and chasten me. The portion of some of to have their affliction by drops. Now one drop, you know, and then another. But the dregs of the cup, the wine of astonishment, like a sweeping grain that leave no food, did the Lord prepare to my portion. Affliction I wanted. This is when she realized how she became very, you know, immunized, like an elected Christian. Affliction I wanted. Yeah, okay. It was like, this is very oxymoronic. You know what's mean oxymoronic?
Yes.
How affliction is something great. It's good for me that I have been afflicted. The Lord has showed me that vanity of these outward things. There are the vanity of vanities and the vexation of spirit. So she's embracing, you know, affliction as something, you know, amazing. I don't want, like, you know, to leave the presenters worried all the time. But I'm sure, like, after the presenters, I'll recap and, you know, comment on what they are going. So you are invited to come. I have to step aside for 25 minutes, I think. You know, this is enough for you.
Okay, good morning all. Today, inshallah, our presentation will be a little bit long. I'm the first one, Sarah Abkura, and my colleague, Wafa. We are talking about the narrative of captivity and restoration of Mrs. Mary Rowlandson, and this is the main title, and it has a subtitle which is The Sovereignty and Godnesses of God, which was published in 1998. Our outline will be a brief introduction, which will be talking about Mary Rowlandson, an autobiography, and we'll talk about the definition of narrative captivity and what is main characteristics and how they are applied on our text today. The brief introduction about King Philip's War will be skipped because Dr. Akram have talked about. And the Puritan background will be 2 lines and their concepts of the MD and liability. Then we will talk about a summary of the 20 moves of of Mary Rowlandson and how it is fictional, applying this on the elements of fiction, and then we will apply the American characteristics on the text, on the piece. Beginning with Mary Rowlandson, she was born in 1637, and then when she was 3 years, she emerged and moved with her family to the New England, to a new establishment of the city of Heaven, and her settlements are she settled in 3 places in Salem, Massachusetts, and finally in Lancaster. In 1656, she had married to Joseph, and the first baby was died, and the 3rd birthday, and then the other 3 children were remained, who are Mary, Joseph, and Sarah. In 1675, Joseph, her husband, moved to Boston to beg the help from the Massachusetts Assembly. In that time, during that time, she and her 3 children were captive by the Indians. And then in 1675, Joseph Rowlandson was died. And in 1679, she remarried to Captain. Focus on the word captain, that all men in her era were captains, while women were. And so, okay. She was remarried to Captain Samuel Talcott, and in 1691, her second husband also died. In 1610, and she was died in the age of 73. Before going through this, from the title we see that it is a narrative captivity for Mrs. Rowlandson. So we have to focus on the word narrative captivity. What is a narrative captivity? Actually, narrative captivity began a separate or an independent genre in the American time, which focuses on that a genre of American literature has been the Indian captivity narrative. So the main cause of these narratives are Indians, and in these stories, usually women are kidnapped and held captives by the American Indians, and the women are taken captives are white women, so they choose the European descent. We have some characteristics of the narrative captivity, and they are applied here. So the first one is these captivity narratives are part of the culture's definition of what a proper woman should be and do. So those narrative captivity focus on what women and the stereotypical images of women in their era, what should be and what should do, not what treats women as should be. They often see the violent deaths and husbands of children, as here we will see Mary Rowlandson witnesses the death, the bloody scenes and violence around her, especially in the burning house scene. The second characteristic is women are unable to fulfill normal women's roles. So their roles are Satan roles, they are restricted, unable to protect their own children, unable to dress neatly or cleanly. They face physical challenges like walking 2 long journeys on foot, and this is applied on Mary Rowlandson in the 20 moves, and even that the published stories in their lives is stepping outside the stereotypical image of women. So this is I think an encouragement or a weird step for her to do. The third characteristic is the captivity stories also perpetuate stereotypical image or stereotypes of Indians as savages. She continues expressing them as savages, black savages. I prefer to die rather than being captured by those black savages. And we're brought in the ongoing conflict between these groups, and settlers moved westward in a society in which men are expected to be the protectors of women. So women are degrading and men were the protectors and being capturing as a woman. So this is like an attack for the female in such a masculine society. The fourth characteristic is the captivity narratives are also usually refer to the religious contrast between the Christian captives and the pagan Indians. So it focuses on this disparity between the religion. And actually, after reading this text, you'll find that the main reason, not a religious reason as they said in the very beginning, but the reason is to expand, to make settlement, and this is actually applied on Philip's war when Philip's killed Masusaman, the Indian man, even though he was converted to Christianity. The captivity narratives can be seen as part of the long history. So we see that it is a historical document, and as long as it is a fictional document. So it is a historical document because it talks about the relationship between the English and the Indian-English relationships. It talks about how the events that go through the 11 weeks of her captivity. Talks about the Philip's War, and it is details. The King Philip's War will be skipped, as we said. Yes. Reasons behind writing the genre. We have some reason behind writing this genre, which is revenge from the Indians at ransom, and replacement of the tribal numbers of the decimated by war and disease. We have reinforcement of the stereotypes of, for example, we have Spanish Indians are brutal, brutish beasts. French, their stereotypes is Indians are soul needing to redemption. For Puritans, they say the satanic threat of religious utopia. To back again to the title itself, it is interesting to note that this title, which is The Narrative Captivity of Mrs. Rowlandson, is and its subtitle, it was retitled again later on after some days before and before her death, which was titled The True History of the Narrative Captivity of Mrs. Rowlandson. Let me read it perfectly. So. It is a true history of the captivity and restoration of Mrs. Mary Rowlandson, acknowledging the making and public relations aspects of publishing. So, whenever, as long as she said that it is a true history, that she considered her text and her piece a historical document for all what happened before. Besides, it is a fiction because she said it is a narrative for Mrs. Rowlandson. And then mentioning the word publishing. So this is totally feminist because before she was afraid of thinking of writing a piece of her personal experience. What about publishing it? What about talking about the word publishing in a title and so on? And then and public relations, those public relations between, as we said, the Indians and the English relationships. And I think the three titles, the title, the subtitle, and the new title, all of them are biblical titles and gives that point of view that she is focusing on the Puritans' lessons, didactic lessons, and so on.
I think they blinked an eye on publishing because, publishing these narratives would encourage expansion, as she said. It will be in their interest because, you are going to attract other people who are reluctant to come to this new land. You're going to show them how the colonization of America is a very fruitful and a very religious project. Like every good Christian should go there to redeem himself. See what I mean? Yes.
Now we have a video which introduces you the story of this narrative. And
it's from the YouTube, yeah?
Yes.
You have to mention that.
It's our source. It's from YouTube, not our own. So it will introduces you a brief about the narrative, and then Wafa will talk about how it is fictional. So listen to it.
The year is 1676. Your name is Mary Rowlandson. You are a Puritan good wife, meaning married woman and homemaker of the Reverend Joseph Rowlandson. Your home is the Massachusetts Bay Colony, an English settlement working to colonize this new world now known as North America. Relations with the local native tribes are strained at best. You have received word of war between the English colonists and natives. You prepare your home for raids on the colony. These raids have been ordered by an influential Native American chief known as King Philip. Your husband is away, visiting local colonist leaders and asking for protection from the natives. On the morning of February 10th, 1676, 3 local tribes, the Narragansett, Nipmuc, and Wampanoag, storm your town, killing and kidnapping your neighbors, friends, and family. You watch in horror as your sister and her children are murdered. 2 of your own children are forcefully taken one way and you another. The smallest of your children remains with you, but she is sick and wounded. Fearing for your life and for the life of your remaining family, you have no choice but to do as these strange people say. Given even basic necessities like food, and some days you are so hungry that you fear you will starve to death. When the opportunity presents itself,
So you know the rest. It's just repetition of the same ideas. She talks about her suffering with these Indians. Going back to the PowerPoint. Before getting into the summary in deep, I have just to say something. I'm sure you know it, but about whether it is history or fiction, we all know that history is written by the victorious ones. So we don't get ourselves annoyed when we see her style, since if the Indians get the battle or the war they passed, they were right in their style and reflect their vision against these Americans. So it's the same. So we don't get ourselves annoyed. Another point I need you to know about this, about her style, that Americans in that period were in the first days or in the first periods of establishing their new world in America. So they need to reflect their history, not in a pure history, but they have to assert fiction in it, in this history. So history in a fictional way is very important to reflect their history and support other people to read their history. So for the summary, or I get into the analysis, the description of Indians. How did she describe Indians in her narrative of captivity? First of all, she said these nervous beasts, when she gets afraid of them the first time, she confesses that. Then she says barbarous creatures, black creatures.
Ravenous beasts.
She said no. Yeah.
Ravenous.
Yes. Sorry. Yes. Black creatures, inhuman creatures. In every description, she doesn't say human even. She just says creatures. So they are not human for her. They are animals for her. So she doesn't underestimate their value as human beings. Another point in her, I think we discussed it. The first person narrator gives different connotations to the reader. The reader may think first of all about the validity of this narrative. Will it be right in her way, or there is something she hides? Of course, there is something she hides, because writing in her in the first person narrator forces you to hide something to give the reader an idea that you have to continue reading and you have to have a whole idea about my writing. Another idea in media res, it's a Latin word, means skepticism, first used by Shakespeare. This term is or means to skip different things from the truth. So
First of all, the beginning. Is it actual beginning? Is it the real beginning? What do you think? Is it the real? Of course it's not, because she uses the first person narrator. We know also the history of British when we went to America to establish their new world. So it's not an actual beginning. It's not actual beginning. The beginning, it does not start with the burning of houses. It has another beginning, which is more crucial than these deeds. The climax, also to prove that it is fictional, we have many features of the fiction work. The beginning, we talked about it. Then the climax, and before the climax, there was many actions that led to this climax action, which is when they burned houses, when they captive, when they killed, when they did their deeds or crucial deeds in her description, of course. The climax starts in the 9th remove, in which Rowlandson realizes her captivity is by no means near an end, and in which she realizes her dependence on both the will of God, you have to focus on this, and the kindness of strangers. In this section, she first eats the meat of a bear and finds it fortifying rather than repulsive. So she starts to communicate with them in a way or another. Then the denouement, when she was more tensioned and annoyed of their deeds. Then the end, I want just to ask if it is expected and or from them, or why did not even give a try to run away.
She couldn't.
She was able, I think.
Yeah, she said that in the narrative that she was able to run, but she wanted God to give her something.
Yes. I'm gonna answer. You have to put on your mind this question: how do the Puritan beliefs of Mary Rowlandson help her to construct a sense of self and of her surroundings during the captivity? First of all, she related every substantial incident to God and His plans for her. That's why she did not escape or even give it a try. This is the answer, okay? She reads from the Bible. It's an extract. Wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and He shall strengthen thine heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. So it.
Thank you very much. We have, we are going to spend another class next week on the narrative of captivity. In fact, and you can continue, like if you have said, but next time we're going to concentrate on the fictional elements more. We have to concentrate on certain extracts. So you are invited to say, okay, I think this extract is important. Yeah. I think, here, there is like an American feature. I think this is like very fictional, okay? I think here there is, what is going to be called self-reliance, So this is what I expect you. But I like their presentation because, in fact, they created a real context for the whole narrative, and the fact that they stressed the fictional, element, it was a wonderful thing. Yes, this woman was telling her point of view. She was deliberately and systematically denigrating those Indians. At the same time, she was, romanticizing the image of the Christian, of the English people, like they are the saviors, they are the pure one, and the other people are the dirty, the nasty, and the horrible people. Okay, so it seems like this narrative is very interesting to read. It's not like boring. So sometimes it might be boring, like she's repeating, but I don't think she's repeating in the same way. Yeah, she's like coming again to the same point, but from a different angle. So I want you next time to read it and to focus on these things, because everybody next time should be asked to say what she likes or what she doesn't like. What kind of quotation? We're discussing quotations next time, okay? Thank you very much. And I wish you to see you next time. Okay? Thank you.